Okay guys, welcome back to the horror of video games. Today I'm talking about the theme of the grotesque. So what I mean by that is something which is visually disgusting, something like piles of dead bodies, or dismembered bodies, or excessive amounts of blood, or excessive amounts of gore. Now the game I'd like to mention in regards to this theme is Amnesia. Now I have a few spoilers about this game, so just warning you. Okay, so in Amnesia, the trick of this game is that your player has forgotten who he was, and he doesn't know what his background is. He's stuck in this castle, he's got to figure it out for himself by reading books and diaries, and etc. But then the player realizes, towards the end of the game, that your character was a torturer, and you actively take part in someone else's torture, basically. And this, I have to say that this scene was grotesque. I think that this was a very unnecessary scene, this was a very sickening scene, and I feel like, you know, great horror games don't need to be sickening, they don't need to be grotesque. And then there's a scene in Doom 3 where there's an impaled body on the ceiling, and then there's a scene in Cry of Fear where someone is beheaded in front of you, and I have to ask the question, is this necessary for the game? I mean, does it benefit the narrative of the game? Does it benefit the horror of the situation? I don't think it does, really. Sometimes I think games are just being grotesque for the sake of being grotesque, and it just degenerates the game into something which is meaningless. So, do I think that a horror game needs to be grotesque in order to be successful? I would say no. I mean, in the footage I've seen of The Evil Within, that game strikes me as a grotesque game, and I think, why couldn't they spend more effort on a great storyline? Or why couldn't they spend more effort on characters and building the scenario, the great scenario? You know, I think a great scenario and a believable game world will make a game far more successful than a game which is just trying to cram packs full of blood and tidal waves of blood and monsters being chopped up. And I think a more subtle game, a game which builds the world for you to believe in, a platform for the horror to exist in, will always be a more successful game in my opinion. Because I think a great horror game doesn't need to be horrific in order to be horrifying. I mean, in Resident Evil, there's this great feeling of restraint and subtlety and suggestion within the horror of Resident Evil. It's the game world, it's the believable scenario, it's the empty corridors, it's this lingering sinisterness of Resident Evil which makes it superior to these games which have tidal waves of blood and sickening scenes and bloody corpses and all this kind of stuff. Great horror games don't need to show you all the details. Great horror games, it's about the suggestion, it's about what surrounds the game, it's about what you can't see, it's about, these are all the things that come together to form a great horror game, and Resident Evil demonstrates this perfectly. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. You can tweet me at thehorrorofvg, or you can see my blog at thehorrorofvideogames.com. See you next time.